Everyone. This video is going to be about working with file validation and cleansing. In earlier assignment, we went through and did some validation using a C# code and a SSIS script task. We're going to use that same method to do some processing on new files. The files are ones that would come in from various different branch offices. Now, in a perfect world, the files would always have the same format and the data would be clean. But as we all know, we don't live in that perfect world. And in real life, often, small things slip through the cracks. An example is, this email address is not correct. It should have an @ symbol instead of a dot. That happens in a couple of email records. Not many, but a couple. This one's missing the .com. So that needs to be cleaned up. In addition to that, the visits file that tells when a patient came in for a visit, and which doctor they saw, and what procedure they had done, it should have time, clinic, patient, doctor, procedure, and charge. But unfortunately, Bellevue again is kind of not keeping up with the rest of the team here, because if you look at their visits, they're missing a column, missing the entire column of clinic ID. That needs to be resolved. Now, theoretically, I could just send it back to them and tell them to fix it. But we're going to try to add data that wasn't there and should have been. We're going to try to validate data and manage it when it is incorrect. And we're going to extract the date from the file name. Sometimes you do extract data from file names, and then use that as part of the import process, adding the date as well as the time. Now, these are all things I have done personally in my professional career for customers, so I know that these are real-world examples. Unfortunately, real-world examples usually have kind of a real-world mess to them. But let's take a shot at how I might approach this. This is not the only way to approach it, but it's just a way of approaching it, and certainly I think you'll find this interesting. Our first step is to create a place where the data is going to go. So I've gone through and created a new table, a patient table, a new patient staging table, and a new visit staging table. I've just made the data type very simple. I'm going to pick up the string data from the table as up to 100 characters. That's more than enough. For each column in the file, I'm just going to pick that data up. So first name, last name, email, address, city, state, zip. I've got matching columns here. And the same is true in the staging table for visits, including the clinics column. Now, if for some reason they don't have a clinic ID, I can just go ahead and leave it as null. That would be certainly possible. In this example, we'll go ahead and fill in a blank. But certainly, you could just import the data as is, making sure that the clinic was just set at null. There's a bunch of different ways that this can be done. And again, we're just trying to show an example. Our next stop is to go over here to SSIS. Got a package all set up to go. And the first part of the package is going to clear out the tables. Clear out the files and then clear out the tables. To clear out the files, these would be the files that had already been processed like the day before. I'll go through and loop through this folder, Clinic Daily Data. The Clinic Daily Data resides on C drive, and I want to clear out the files in that folder itself, but not in the subfolders Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond. To do that, I'll set up a for each loop container. Oops, there's something going on here. Dispatch process has been suspended. Usually means something's running in the background. Let me pause this and figure out what that is. Okay, we're back. Not sure exactly what was the holdup, but anyway, it's all working now. So I'm going to look at the for each loop container I had set up. I'll open up its dialog box and review its collection. So in the collection page, I'll see that I'm looping through the clinic daily data on C drive, looking for any files in there. Now, when I find a file, I will send the path and its file name, the fully qualified file name, to a SSIS variable that I called, oddly enough, file name. So I made this variable as part of the package itself. It's a package level variable, and I did that so I can use it in a bunch of different SSIS tasks. Each time the for each loop container does a process, it'll have that file name. And at that point, I can use other tasks to do some kind of processing, such as in this case, gotta be 1 pixel off, huh? In this case, I'm just going through and deleting the file, whatever the file name. Remember that the file name also has the path, so it'll delete that file. And we can see that happen. I'll go ahead and run this. I think I'm going to have to close down Visual Studio and reopen it. It's just acting too weird. Give me a second. Okay, we're back with a freshly open Visual Studio project. So I'll try this again, and we can execute the container. Doing so should clean up our files, and as you can see now they're gone. Now, let me stop it. I want to clear out those tables, and to do that I've created a stored procedure that when called will either truncate the table if it already exists or create it if it doesn't. And of course, if I had more staging tables, I'd just add on to it. I think the tables already exist, and they're filled with data from an earlier test. I'll go ahead and run the SSIS package, or excuse me, task, and we will see that that is now cleared out. Okay, the first part is pretty simple, and we are done with that. The next part, a little trickier, but once again, it's similar to what we had done in a previous assignment. I'll start off with a for each loop like we saw before. However, this time, I'll make sure that I have the checkbox on Traverse Subfolders. So start in the parent folder, but drill down into all the subfolders, Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond. Once again, I'll pull out the fully qualified name, but I'm only looking for files that have the name of something followed by new patients.csv. So the something is going to be the current date that the file was created. Once again, when I find it, I will send that file name with its path to the file name variable. With that done, I can now go into my script task and start doing some processing. It's best if I just go ahead and start it up and we see how it works. I'll go ahead and execute the container, and we'll just walk through the code. Our first stop is in the main method, in which case we call a processing procedure. In C# we call methods. And in this case, I have the write patient data to a separate file. Now, This is patient data, and it includes an email address, so I'm going to be using the same code as I had before. In fact, I just copied and pasted it to start and start modifying things. Things I modified was, of course, the file name I want to use. So I pick up the file name from the for each loop. I can see that it has its full name and path. I've also changed the name of the valid and invalid files that I want to work with. We will try to open those files now. We open the source file, we open the valid file, and we open the invalid file. With that completed, we now are going to create a string variable that will hold one row of data, a line of data. I've called it str line data, and I'll set it to a blank to get started. But then immediately I'll start a while loop, in which case now I'll read out a line of text from the source file and deposit it in my new variable. If I look at this line of text, I can see that it's the header information: the first name, last name, email, address, city, state, and zip. If I split that up using the split command, I get a small table of data in memory, a row of data in memory. This is an array, so my little array represents one row of data, and as such I called it ARR for array, one row of data. I now have at the 0th column, because the columns start off at 0, 1, 2, 3. 0th is first name, 1 is last name, then email, address, city, state, and zip. I can check to see whether or not that 0th column contains the word fname. That being the case, then I'd just say, you know what, I don't want to import that. I'm going to continue the loop without going any further. The next row of data is drawn from the file. This particular row does indeed have a validation error. So we advance it, we split the columns up. It does not have fname in the first element. So we now check its validity in the validity of the value in the second column. I use the exact same function I did in a previous module. Examine the email address with a regular expression and choose whether or not to indicate it was true or false that it was valid. Since this was not a valid email, it comes back with a Boolean of false and does not write to the valid text file. Instead, it goes through and writes to an invalid text file. To do so, I'm going to format the string so that it looks correct. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to use little substitution parameters. These are the same thing we do in SQL programming when you make custom error messages. So the 0th placeholder is going to be used to fill up the 0th member of the array, so the 0th column. That 0th column, in this case, is John. The first column is Smith. Next column is the invalid email address, and then followed by the address, city, state, and zip. I would just place all that data into my invalid string. Now, because patients coming in, if they're new patients, I don't want to just completely not record their information. What happens if they came in, they're a brand new patient, but they also came in for a visit? I want to be able to have records of them. So I am going to go ahead and record them as both a valid entry and an invalid entry. However, I'm going to be telling it to check the email by just putting in the character, the actual word check in the character string. When I import the data later, the invalid email will have the word check. This is something I used in an earlier part of the final milestones videos, in which case I just went ahead and flagged things with the word check if they came in incorrectly. Okay, all advanced, and now I'll just keep doing it. I don't need to see that over and over again, so I'll step out of that method, in which case it finishes up that one file. I end up with the Bellevue records being processed. But it starts the script again to do the next file. And I'll step out of that. And now we have the Kirkland files as well. And we'll do the last one. Step out of that. And now we have all the records, including the invalid and the valid. They're now ready to be imported into our staging table for further processing. Importing it is going to be quite simple. I just make a connection to the new file, the new valid file, pull in the data, and deposit it in my staging table. And that takes care of the patient's file processing, at least as far as that goes. Looking at it further, you'll find that the actual street address has some issues as well. The challenge would be to go through and apply the same technique of using a regular expression to flag the street addresses. In the visits record, we have other issues. Let's walk through this one as well. Bellevue doesn't have the clinic ID. That's one of the issues. And all the files are actually missing the date, and we want that. We want that because the SQL table that we're trying to pour this into has the date, time, clinic, patient, doctor, procedure, and charge, and we need to match that. This is what the current visits table looks like with all the existing data. We want to make sure we add to that correctly. So, next, we're going to process this sequence container. Actually, I'll just go ahead and process the for loop. With the Vista Projects script editor open, I now see that I'm in the main method, and I'm just about to call the new write new visit data to separate text files. The code is similar but not exactly the same. So, in fact, I just copied and pasted it, and then I start making some changes. One thing that I have a note here about the method I used in this example is a static method. And what that means is that it can be called directly. I'm so sorry, an instance method. It can, I have to make an object from it to be able to call the method. This is something that's needed in SSIS. When we worked with the stored procedures in SQL Server that connected to C# code, we used a static method. So that's what the note there on line 86 is indicating. Okay, with that in mind, let's just continue on. First thing is I'm picking up a new string. The for loop is set to find files with visits.csv in it, which is different than the patient's one. Now, I'll go through and set up the valid data file. In this case, I chose not to use the invalid data file. We open the files up that we need to work with, one for the source and one for the destination. We split the data file name so that we get access to the clinic it came from, the branch it came from, Bellevue, Kirkland, or Redmond, and also access to the date in the file name. Just like before, I'm going to access the date using the same code where I take the third column and split it based on the V, and then extract out the first element of that result. That gives me the date. I then proceed on to loop through each row of data in the files. Once again, I'll note that there is a header, and I'll check to see if the word time shows up in the 0th column of that header. It does. I continue through the loop and start again, getting another row of data for processing. This is the Bellevue row. So when it comes down later on to check to see whether or not there are 6 columns like there should be, it finds that that's not true. The Bellevue file has only 5 columns of data. So I'll now go through and do some additional processing beyond what I would normally do to a file that was formatted properly. I will first check to see whether or not it actually is a Bellevue file, assuming that there's some special issues that Bellevue has, and we're going to have to make some special code for it. If Redmond and Kirkland had different issues, we could program for that as well. I'll find out that yes, this is actually the Bellevue file, so I got the file name, and I've extracted out the Bellevue part. And so now I just format the string like I want it. In this case, the string gets formatted, and I add on the clinic ID of 1. I hard code that because it's missing. I need to add that in. I also, of course, add in the file date. I write it to my valid file. It's all fixed up and ready to go, and I just keep doing that for each of the files that I find in the subfolders. You can see the 1 shows up after I get done with the Bellevue processing, and the 2 shows up for the Kirkland processing, and now we're going to finish up and we'll see the 3 show up as well. So yes, it's working. Excellent. Once again, it would be time to import that into my staging tables. I'll test to make sure that works. I'll come back and look at my tables and see for sure that they got their data. Yep, if they don't, I have to go figure out why. I must not have ran that. Really easy to not get everything tested well. You have to be careful. There we go. Okay, now once that's done, I'll go through and start moving the data from the staging tables into the actual tables of the OLTP database. So that's the game plan. Currently these are not done yet. They will be. We'll talk about that in another video coming up, where we use a stored procedure to do additional processing on the content of these files. But at this point, we have the staging table. They're filled up using some C# code, and we've cleaned up some of the mess. There's still more mess to be cleaned up and a few more things to do, but we've got a real good start on it. Hopefully you found this video useful. Remember that the way I did this here is only one way to do it, but the process will be similar no matter which type of code you use, so this may help you on whatever your choice was. Take care.